The headlines. Britain sweats for more reasons than one, as temperatures soar and anxiety mounts over easing lockdown. We need someone in charge to get a grip, commented one parent, unsure about doing the school run. Do I need to wear a mask, or do I not? We also need someone in charge to get a grip, said the litter pickers, wading through mountains of garbage left on the beaches of England. This lot is just disgusting. Well, we certainly need someone else to get a grip, commented one teacher at a half-empty school, because our head is so scared she's locked herself in her office and is slipping notes under the door to avoid infection. Truly inspiring leadership. You'll think you'll have got problems, commented one American exchange student in Portsmouth. In my country, a policeman just murdered an unarmed black man on the streets, and now our cities are literally on fire. Don't tell me you've got problems. We urgently need someone in charge to get a grip. And look who we've got in charge. Reacting to photos of the president holding up a Bible in Washington, D.C., Gosport pastor Corinne Dwyer diplomatically commented, "I am delighted to see the president owns a copy of the Bible. I can only encourage him and all Americans to read it. Hopefully they will discover there is someone they can turn to get a grip." I'm Andy. That was fake news, but not all fake news, sadly. And you're watching Alverstoke Antiviral. Well, hello. I'm here joined today by Adrian Titheridge. Adrian, a long-standing member of AEC since, how old were you, AD, when you first came to church?
I must have been about 8.5. So it was probably about 1978.
Wow.
Around then. We were in Goma Junior School then.
Yeah, fair way back, but some of us may remember those days. Not sadly. Adi, it's good to see you. How have you been doing, and how have you been keeping in lockdown?
Well, first of all, good morning to everybody. Absolutely fantastic. I've been doing loads of stuff regarding preparing the house, getting it all decorated, and the garden, loads of decluttering, and really sort of spending a lot of time prioritising what's needed, including with Charlotte, doing a lot of things there, and really getting to grips with what I actually need in the house and what I don't. But it's been quite a challenge, I think, to be just staying, on a lockdown. But I think, every day I've done something sort of to do with the house. I had lots of time to do reading, which I've never have done in my life, because basically I've never had a chance to read, books through since I was in the catering trade. And, obviously I do read the Bible, but not as often as I'd like to. So I've kind of read through a little bit there as well. So it's been really good.
What books have you been reading, just out of interest?
Well, actually, it's all about behavioural things to how you come across to different sort of people, and the way you approach, which has been very interesting. A lot of psychology, and yeah, just things that are. I've been reading a lot of John's Gospel. I've just read through, which was really good. And then I've been backing it up by re-watching the DVDs of the Bible, which was really good. So yeah, that was very good. I mean, I'm always very inspired by certain books in the Bible. So I thought, well, that kind of inspired me a lot. And I've been chatting away a lot to people online as well, so it's been really good. Very hard at first, and obviously I kind of think just before that, to be perfectly honest, I probably was never experienced anxiety before, and I kind of had a little bit of it through kind of the situation and where I was, and just finding out Nick had passed away from a heart attack, And it kind of just brought back the two bereavements with Sam and Nick. So I kind of wasn't focusing myself at all. And the only way to describe it is you are there, but you're not seeing the whole picture of everything. So I kept on getting these pop-ups through for, like, my Bible thing just pops up every morning. And this thing came up and it just said, basically words to the effect of, do not worry about tomorrow because tomorrow will take care of itself, and just concentrate on today. So I started doing that from that day onwards, because what was happening was everything was all sort of in your mind. When I've never had anxiety before, but the best way to describe it is this probably went on for about 6 weeks, from the beginning of January through to sort of like middle of February. And you have this kind of, everything's there all together. Now, normally, under a normal rational AD, you'd go, right, I'm going to prioritise, sort out this thing, then go on to this thing, then go on to this thing. But I won't go into too much detail because of time, but basically every day, all these things kept popping up on the daily reading that I got from the phone, and they were so helpful. So it just seemed to be really amazing. And then I started thinking, well, okay, let's prioritise. What do I need to do? What do I need to sort out? And obviously a lot was to do with, sort of banging out doing things in the house, sorting other things out with other things I need to do, and also how can I help others? I've got all this time on my hands. So what I did with helping others was basically, I think if you ask me another question, it'll come on to that.
Okay,
probably.
yes, because the next question is, we're touching on this a bit, is in terms of what have been the challenges spiritually and the encouragement spiritually that you've been experiencing.
Okay, well, the challenge is, I'm a very social person, as you all know. Love to chat.
Surely not, AD.
But not being able to go to church. Now, there were a couple of reasons why I couldn't go to church previously to that as well, through looking after somebody. And basically, I could not go to church realistically from the beginning of January, which also added, this thing was missing in my life, So to have a lockdown when you're actually almost ready that you can go back again is thinking,
really annoying.
What am I going to do? I haven't seen anyone for a while. So I probably randomly went to one early morning service out of sort of the 8 weeks previously to the lockdown. So basically what happened was, when these streams come on, fantastic. So what I've been doing, I've been watching yours live. Then I've been looking at a few others as well, including Solent with David Stanford. And I was, as I said to you a minute ago, I was very surprised because last week's Colin popped up on there. So that was the guest speaker, so it was fantastic, So what I do is I listen to one or two other services as I'm doing my daily exercise, which is another thing I'm trying to keep in shape by doing the steps. And that is amazing because I can use them as a podcast. And then I was talking to people, and years and years ago, my mother used to do the ironing for a lady, and unfortunately they had to move. Home broke down and they moved to Scotland. So Mum decided that she was going to help them by putting them up for 2 days, and they came down when I was 13 and this young lady was 14. So very good friend of mine, and always just been really good friends. So lost contact totally. All of a sudden on Facebook, I think I was asking a question about something to her regarding the children, And this thing popped up. Never spoke to her for 2 years. And then I spoke to her on the Easter Sunday. Now, she was feeling very upset over certain things. So we were talking about how she got on and how her childhood, and basically her brother, which is the middle sibling, sadly passed away. And she was commenting that she didn't have any photos of them when they were children. But it so happened that on those 2 days when they visited, we had a picture up at Stokes Bay of all 3 of the children together. So I said, would you like me to send it to you? So not only did it give her happiness on the day, it also gave her younger sister the happiness. Then we started talking about the Lord and how she can't understand how, somebody can be really into that. Everybody used to criticise her and the way the family was, and church has never helped or anything. So I just said a few things, and I won't go into massive detail because obviously it's private towards the young lady. And then she was saying something about having, a few other issues. So I said, well, have you spoke to your husband about this? And she said, no. So I said, okay. So anyway, I left it at that. And then all of a sudden, 3 o'clock in the morning, I got a text message through. It's obviously to her husband saying, have you turned the lights off, or whatever the message was. So I'd sort of waited till the next morning, and I text back saying, you obviously meant this for somebody else. And she said, thank you so much for the chat. I now actually do believe there is a God. And I thought, wow, that is a massive turning point. And then she put on about what I was talking about, which is why I'm talking about this, is your love for others. Because no matter what they do to yourself, if it's somebody that's nasty to you, whatever, or somebody's, not sort of like happy with you, if you give them the love back in whatever way or form it is for that particular relationship, it normally really does help, and it changes that person's view. And that has been taught to me through the Lord, through the Bible, and through in particular Jesus being on this earth. And I think it's really important to do that, and to not to sort of over or underthink things, and prioritise things, and like live for now. Obviously, you had a past and you learn from it and move forwards. The other thing that I was thinking of was actually what a wonderful, amazing marriage I had with Sam, and how she was ill a lot, but at the point of her passing away, she was the best she was. And also the same with Nick. I believe that the guy that was helping him from the mental health team was actually said that Nick has been the best. He's been working with him for 26 years. We got him on board, and it was his first job. And he was saying about that. So my love is always going to be there for them, and their love was always going to be there in memories. But now it's really important for me to move forwards, and prioritise the things in my life. And I was also going to say that the help, do you find this? There's always somebody's there at the right time, in the right situation for everything. And God puts them there. And I've been there helping people. I've had people help me. And that's why I'm telling that story, basically, from before. And it's little things like, if someone needs something and you've got it and you don't particularly need it, if it's not going to be too expensive of a loss, you just give it to them. You don't sort of go, oh, right, okay, well, how much can I make out of this? And I just think it's nice to have that concept when you can. And so I feel very blessed in all those things, really.
That's so encouraging to hear. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the world's best film, which is Frozen 2. But there's a bit of a thing in Frozen 2. The only bit that sticks with me, it was not so great, but there was one interesting line where they talked about doing what's the next right thing. What's the next right
Yes.
thing we have to do? And it's that simple attitude which doesn't, a bit like you were saying, avoids getting totally gripped by all the thoughts and just looks at the day in front of us and thinks, what can I do? What can I do? Who can I love? Who
Yes.
can I serve? And who can I speak to about Jesus, and who can I
Yeah.
pray for? And there's so much that you can simply do, even if you're not doing very much, isn't there? Yeah.
Absolutely, and I really feel very strongly that the Lord guides you in your journey through your life, and the experiences that you have through your life. Some of them are amazingly good, some of them are bad, but they're there for you to learn from, and then to move forward. And in particular, like the grieving side, I've never had to do that where you had two people die so quickly. And that was really hard for me, I think, spiritually as well, to be honest, and mentally and physically. But where I've had the time off on furlough, it's given me time to really think about exactly what I want to do as an individual, which I've never had that opportunity before in my life. It's always been looking after other people, and also how I can serve God the best. And, obviously now my next stage is building this house up with 3 other people that are going to be living here very soon.
Right, these are your new tenants, right?
Yeah, and it's helping me and vice versa, helping them. It won't be such a, it's quite. It was quite lonely on a lockdown if you've got 2 people living in the house, and obviously with a teenager, they do like their tech and all that. And the other really good positive thing was today, Charlotte had a little mini operation on her big toe. I was really surprised. She was so cool about it. She just went up there, sat down. They did the local anaesthetic, did what they had to do, bandaged it up. You wouldn't even know that she's had an operation. I know it's mini, nothing massive, but I think it's absolutely amazing. I was praying about it, and I was quite worried about it. But because I've had this lockdown thing, again, I've prioritised everything, and also I'm focused 100% like I was, whereas I don't actually think I was focused properly through the whole time of the bereavement without actually realising it.
Right.
Which was very, big for me, really. But there are other things like, there are always people there at the right time and the right place. I mean, I remember bumping into Anne Williams and Sally Stringer a couple of years ago. Right time, right place. They know what that was, and they remember that. And then, there's always people that are there for, within the congregation to help each other. And I feel that the church family should help each other, and we all do. And the amazing thing is everybody's got these certain strengths or talents or whatever. So if one person can't do that, then another person can. And I see that within AEC, and I think that's what makes it, really amazing. Really, the whole concept of a church and a church family is, it's nice and be reassuring. As I said to you the other day, a lot of people are actually searching, and younger people are searching. I think the age group was 18 to 30. So I was just thinking, if every one of us reached out to one person, maybe 1 or 2 people might come along.
If you're 18 to 30 and you're watching this and you've never met any of us, you're very welcome to come along when Church restarts. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. but also, if there was people that were any age really, but I think that was somewhere, some statistic somewhere, but yeah, I think it's definitely been challenging, being not able to go into church.
Yeah. Well, the day will come when we will see you again, as the Queen said. Yeah. Eddie, thanks so much for joining us, and thank you for that. It's really encouraging to hear from you. So
thank you. God bless.
God bless. Bye now.
See ya.
Well, I'm here with Colin now, and we're going to have a chat about a king who gets a grip into Samuel. And I'll start with a little story. I was driving in the Yorkshire area where I grew up, the country lanes once, and I had someone in the passenger seat, and as I came to the top of a little hill, I was going a little fast, and I came a bit too close to the wall for the comfort of my passenger. And her reaction was to say two words: Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Words that get said again and again all over the country every day. And yet so often they're said in surprise or in anger or in frustration. But do people have any idea what they mean? Why do we say that? What is the content of those words? We understand Jesus as a historical person, but what does Christ add? What does it mean for Jesus to be the Christ? One of the most basic things about Christian belief is an understanding that this historical figure is something called the Christ. There's a famous moment in the Gospels where Jesus says to Peter, "Who do you say I am?" And Peter answers, "You are the Christ." But what does he mean by that? What does Christ mean? And not just a one-word translation, but what is the concept? What is the package of ideas that clusters around that Peter is reaching for as he reaches for that word, Christ? And to understand that, we need to go back to the Old Testament, because as a friend of mine says, the Old Testament gives us the clothes which Jesus then wears. We need to understand what Christ, which is a word meaning anointed, or used to mean anointed king, Messiah, actually means in the reality and in the context of the Old Testament story. And for that, we need to go to the book of 2 Samuel. So 2 Samuel, if you were watching the last episode, you might remember that there's 1 Samuel, and the two form one complete work, actually. And it's all about rising and falling. Colin, do you remember those rises and falls and what was going on?
Indeed, yes.
Yeah. And God was raising up the humble, wasn't he, and bringing down the proud. And we saw that with a few characters, didn't we?
Yep. Saul being one of the major ones, but also Eli's sons, I suppose, and Samuel's sons and their father. Yeah.
Yeah. And Saul comes to a sticky end at the end of 1 Samuel, the first king, the people's choice, which God confirms. But actually, God raises up another king, David, doesn't he, before he's even king, in 1 Samuel. The book ends there when Saul dies, and 2 Samuel starts when the old king is gone and David really rises to power now, and he comes to the throne. And the first, it's basically one big arc, a bit like we have those arcs of Saul and everything. The book of 2 Samuel is like a big arc. The first 10 chapters are the sort of golden years of David and his rise to success and more success. And then we get issues in the second half. But really, it shows us the meaning of the word Christ, because finally in 2 Samuel, now Saul is gone. Now the dysfunctional, disobedient anti-Messiah is gone. We have God's choice of Messiah, who God picked back in 1 Samuel, and he is now running the shop. We see him being appointed king in Hebron. We see him winning battles. We see him unifying the country against the son of Saul, Ishbosheth, who dies. We see him administering justice and punishing people who kill innocent people as well, and not being complicit in that. And we see him capturing his capital, Jerusalem, and making that the capital of his kingdom. We see him bringing the Ark of the Covenant as well, to bring the Ark that symbolizes God's presence with his people into the middle of his kingdom. And he really helps us understand what God is doing and what his role is. So here are just 3 small quotes. Oh, that's the wrong thing. That's my script. Here we go. That should be right, shouldn't it? Can you see that, Colin?
Yep.
There we go.
Now do it.
Yeah, so these three, so forget the bottom one, these three, now do it. So these are things that people say in the early chapters of 2 Samuel about David. Now do it, for the Lord promised David, by my servant David, I will rescue my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and the hand of all their enemies. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one, David, who led Israel on their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel. You will become their ruler. And in 2 Samuel 5, then David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel and had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people, Israel. And there are just three quotes there, which I've pulled out of the story, which are embedded in the story, which talk about what God is actually doing in raising up this human King David and his political success. What is going on? Well, God has made a promise to David. By his servant, he's made David king. Why? Well, in the first quote, so I will rescue my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and their enemies. God is raising up a king who will rescue them. And he's made the choice that he will shepherd his people Israel in the second quote. You will shepherd my people Israel. He will protect them. He will guard them. He will lead them. He will be the one in charge, the one who gets a grip on the situation and make sure it doesn't descend into chaos like so often in the days of the judges. And then in the third quote, we see David knew that the Lord establishes him as king and has exalted his kingdom. Why? For the sake of his people, Israel. So the point of David being in charge is not just that someone needs to be in charge. The point is David needs to be in charge for the sake of his people, because the people need a king. They need a ruler. They need a rescuer. They need someone who will get a grip on the situation and keep them safe and protect them from the hand of their enemies and shepherd them and lead them. We need leadership, don't we? Things go south when there's anarchy and chaos and no one's in charge and no decisions are being made. And that's why we cry out for leaders and we feel our need of them in the absence of leadership. And that's such a key part of understanding what it means to be the Christ, to be the Messiah. It's to be God's chosen anointed king. And on top of that, the king who rescues, the king who protects, the king who shepherds, and who guides and leads his people. He will be the king who saves the day. And the first half of 2 Samuel shows David's rise and succeeding in so many of those areas. And we see his good character. We see him, in one case, rejoicing before the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord in quite an undignified manner that his wife gives him some attitude for. But he says, I don't care. I will become even more undignified because I'm going to celebrate before God. He cares about God and he has a heart for God and a passion for God. And he's exactly the sort of leader we need. Then in the second half of 2 Samuel, it gets really depressing. I genuinely, I don't know when the last time you read 2 Samuel, but when we read about David's affair with Bathsheba and all the struggles of his kingdom in the second half, I genuinely felt my stomach churning a bit, Colin. You know, that kind of feeling. Do you know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah, because he had been doing so well, hadn't he, up until that point. And then he chooses to stay at home.
Yeah,
when the rest of the army's gone off to fight. Yeah.
Yes, when the kings go off to war, what is it? 2 Samuel 11:1. First thing it said, David was at home, and that led to his affair, and that led to his cover-up and his killing of Uriah. And from that point, God doesn't give him everything he deserves, but God brings judgment on him to some extent. And he says, there's going to be chaos in your family. And you just see it played out in the most tragic, horrible way with the sons of David. You see it with Amnon, his, who I think might be his eldest, I can't quite remember, but who basically assaults his half-sister Tamar, treats her appallingly, and then is killed in a sort of honor killing by Absalom, who's the girl's brother, at a feast, which is, it's very messy and very personal and very X-rated, really. And then Absalom becomes this sort of handsome, smiling, evil genius. I was trying to think of a character in fiction who's a bit like Absalom, but he's this very good-looking, aspirational person people look up to, and he stands in the street, and whenever anyone's got a problem, he chats to them. Oh, what's your problem? Oh, it could be so much better if I were in charge. And he starts to build this coalition, and then he launches a coup against his father and drives him out of Jerusalem. and he ends up dead in the end. It's a failed coup, but not before he's driven David from Jerusalem, and there's a battle in a forest, and he dies a horrible death, and all sorts of things happen. But it's chaos. David's family experiences chaos in the second half of the book, and it's clear that David wins the fight because he is the Lord's anointed. He relies on him. It's a bit like round 2 of the Saul episodes, where Saul is chasing David, and the Messiah is a persecuted Messiah, and he's a suffering Messiah, and he's opposed, and he has to trust in God to give him victory. And there's another point we could talk about how the narrative of 2 Samuel makes you pick a side in this, because lots of people, as David leaves Jerusalem, are met by him on the road, and some of them curse him and say horrible things to him and curse the Lord's anointed. Others support him. One goes back to be a mole inside Absalom's organization to, bring it down from the inside. And it really, you get this division between people who side with the Lord's choice of king and who go against the Lord's choice of king. And it really poses the question, who are you going to side with? Are you going to side with God's anointed king? Even though he's suffering, even though there's a much more humanly attractive, humanly charismatic alternative gaining steam, are you going to go along with that, or are you going to stick with God's king? And I think there's an application there for us when we think about God's King Jesus as well, in terms of whose side are we on? Are we on the side of God's anointed, or are we going with alternatives? Do you have any thoughts on that, Colin?
No, nothing jumps out at me. I mean, it is interesting how one of his wise advisors goes over to Absalom, doesn't he? And then the Lord thwarts his advice, because he encourages Absalom to pursue David, and whereas one of the other guys says, no, leave it, for another day. Yeah.
It's very much made clear that that's from God as well, that God is thwarting the wisdom of Absalom's counsel, because if you go up against the Lord's anointed king, God will make sure that his king wins. Anyway, so there's all this mess at the end of the book, and then at the end of the book there's sort of happy moments and bad moments. We hear about the David does a song, just like 1 Samuel starts with a psalm. So 2 Samuel near its end has a couple of poetic passages which reflect on David's career as Messiah and king. And we then get a sort of end episode where David brings a plague on the people by calling a census, and because of his sin, and an atonement needs to be made right at the end of the book on the site of the future temple. So we have a real mixed legacy for David by the end of the book. And much like Saul, we've sort of come in an arc. We've had his rising to heights that Saul never got to, but we've also had him very much failing. And one of the big questions that's haunted me is, well, what is the difference between David and Saul, really? Both are sinners, both are flawed humans, both are anointed king, but then it gets messy. What is the difference? Is he just another loop to show that we need a king? Well, actually, there is a difference, I think. And I think it is 2 Samuel 7. 2 Samuel 7. This is the key passage you need to know about in 2 Samuel, because it's key for the whole Bible story. The unique thing that sets David apart from Saul and the judges is that David gets a special covenant with God. And I'm going to take you through some of it really quickly. So here it is. David wants to build a house for God. And God says, no, I'm going to build a house for you. Here's what he says. Now then, tell my servant David, this is what the Lord Almighty says. I took you from the pasture, from tending the flock, and appointed you ruler over my people Israel. There's God appointing David as king. I have been with you wherever you have gone. That's an aspect of being the Lord's anointed. God is with you. And I have cut off all your enemies before you. And then we get some present tense blessings for David. Now I will make your name great, like the greatest men of the earth. And I'll provide a place for my people Israel, and will plant them so they can have a home of their own and no longer be disturbed. Wicked people will not oppress them anymore as they did in the beginning, and have done ever since the time I appointed leaders over my people Israel. I will also give you rest from all your enemies. And just reflecting on those passages which talk about David's present kingdom, those words are rich in Old Testament promise language. So do you remember the word rest, Colin, from Joshua and stuff like that, and Exodus, and what that was about?
Yep, finding place and an inheritance and a security in a new land. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, that also plugs back into Abraham, doesn't it? Because God promised a land to Abraham, the promised land. There could be a new Eden, a place of rest, a place of blessing, a place of reconciliation. And there's another echo of Abraham here, actually. I will make your name great. That's what God said to Abraham. I will make your name great. So we now see the promise, God's plan to save the world, to reverse the curse of the fall through the promises to Abraham, are going to come true through David. They're going to come true in the kingdom of the Lord's anointed king. Really important to see that God's rescue plan comes through his king and his kingdom. And those are the present tense things he promises. And then he talks about the future of David's family. And he says this, the Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish his throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. And now we see that God has plans for the family of David beyond David himself. There's going to be an heir to David, an heir whose kingdom will be established, which won't rise and fall, which won't go to pieces, a kingdom which will endure, a king who will have a father-son relationship to God, who will image his rule onto the world as Adam was supposed to, and who will be like a son to him, and who will bring God's presence, because he will build a house for God's name and make it possible for sinful people to live with God, because God will be there in his house, with his where his name is magnified, which displays his glory. He's going to bring the restored relationship with God in this kingdom, can you see? And this is going to be an eternal kingdom. I'll establish his throne forever. And of course, there are conditions to this. When he does wrong, I will punish him with a rod wielded by men, with floggings inflicted by human hands. And we see that come true in the book of Kings, when the heirs of David, who are the first instance in people like Solomon and so on, are the first instance inheritors of this promise, do sin, and they don't live up to being the kings they should be. And God does punish them with exile and other things. But verse 15, my love will never be taken away from him as I took it away from Saul. There's a difference. Saul flopped because of sin, but with something about the Davidic family is going to be different. God is going to make sure that David's house and his kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever. There's going to be a permanent fix, a permanent kingdom with a permanent king who will get a grip on the situation and fix the situation, and who will bring a saving rescue, and not just in the ways of David bringing security in battle, but also in the sense we see at the end of the book with bringing atonement, I think. And the Old Testament will say more about that, about how atonement needs to be made in the reconciliation and in the kingdom for the sins of people, and to make sure that God's people escape the judgment of God. And the whole rest of the Bible storyline flows out of this moment, doesn't it, Colin? Because basically, once God has said, this family, Israel, this people are going to be the channel of blessing to the world, and then this family within Israel, this king, this kingly line is going to be the eternal kingdom where things are going to be fixed, finally. As soon as we have that, the rest of the Bible storyline flows out of that, doesn't it? And it takes us to Solomon, who we'll talk about in coming weeks, takes us to the heirs of Solomon, and it takes us beyond the exile to Jesus, doesn't it?
Yep.
And there's a real sense in which when we say Jesus is the Christ, that gets said so often. What does it mean? It means he is the eternal king of 2 Samuel 7. It means he is the Davidic king who's like David, who saves, who rescues, but whose kingdom is going to last forever, and in whose kingdom where will be rest and restored relationship with God. And that sets up a big application for me, and maybe this is our closing thought, but the big application in terms of if we look for someone to get a grip and fix the situation, and to bring us to a place where there is rest and we can be forgiven and restored in relationship with God and have him dwelling with us, and in a kingdom where we will be eternally secure and safe. The person the Bible points us to, if Trump would open it and read it, is Jesus.
Hmm.
And I think that's something we need to hear in times of, well, in good times and bad times, wouldn't you say, Colin?
Yeah. I was thinking too with this, your offspring, which then becomes quite clearly an individual, his kingdom, but that offspring goes back to Genesis after the fall, as well as we've mentioned, Abraham, and sort of, and it's come about through all that upheaval in the time of the judges, and through the faith of Ruth. So you see God's guiding hand and purpose being outworked through all the ups and downs, which we've seen in 1 Samuel and we see here as well. Yeah.
And the amazing blessing at the end, I'm thinking of 1 John as well, is that we find that we are Christians. What does that mean? It means, little Christ. It's some diminutive of the word Christ. The fact is, New Testament tells us we are united to Jesus Christ by faith, and we share in the blessings that he has earned for us. And that means 1 John says how great the love that the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. 2 Samuel 7, I will be his father, he will be my son. He is the Son. And yet we can be sons in the Son. We can share in his royal sonship and that relationship to God that he has, which is the amazing privilege that we share his intimacy with God. And that's also how 2 Samuel sets us up for Jesus. So thank God for Jesus, eh?
Yeah, very much so.
I think that's about all for today's episode, unless you have any closing thoughts, Colin.
I was just thinking when you linked David to Jesus Christ and to Christians, I was thinking about how we were made to rule the earth in all of its facets and to look after it, and how the future kingdom looks to us participating in ruling and judging, actually, over peoples and over the new heavens and new earth. What that will actually look like, we don't know, but we were invested with that responsibility. We failed, and now we're going to be re-established in a way better than we ever were in the past. Yeah,
and boy, do we need an improvement. Boy, do we need to be in a world where there's rest and where there's security in an eternal kingdom. So your kingdom come. I think that's the application. All remains to be said.
Yep.
Stay close to Jesus.
And wash your hands.